T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, you guys are now tapped into the coolest reptile podcast network in the entire world, the Trap Talk Reptile Network. If you haven't already, if you're new here, like and subscribe, hit the notification bell. We are now 7 days a week covering everything from new breeders to monitors to chondros to everything in between. So super excited for that. And it's me. How are you guys doing? I'm so excited. I'm a little tired. As probably most of you know, I flew back from Daytona today. So I went to the Reptile Breeders Conference. That was this weekend. First time I've ever been there. The only other probably bigger show I've been to is Schaumburg in 2023 I went to. So it was a lot bigger than that, a lot more variety. Just across the species, Schaumburg is more your, a lot of ball pythons, crescent geckos, that type of thing. So it was really cool seeing all the different species. Saw a lot of cool animals. Some of my favorites. I love the Sunset Project, as you guys know, but Sunset Hypo, that girl was pretty good size and looked great. I saw a pretty good size DG puzzle at Hocus Herps, and I don't work DG, but that animal was really stunning too. Some hypo paint stuff, because I like paint. Rice Reptiles had quite a few awesome animals too. They had a shredder gene that looked pretty cool, and some clown combos, and some really nice lace stuff. I like lace myself, so those are some of the things I saw and really liked. And I got to see a bunch of you. That was mainly the reason why I went, was to catch up, and it was really awesome talking to people for the last year and be able to see you guys in person, seeing that vibe just kind of cross over and just making connections and networking. And that is overall, why we do this, and reaching out or meeting other people and just building up that network and new friends and everything like that is so amazing. So I'll definitely be back next year. Probably going to go to Tinley as well in October. Never been to Tinley, so hopefully I'll see some of you there too. But before I do the sponsors, I'm going to go ahead and say hi to some of you guys in the comments. So we got Eric's Morph Factory. Met him this past weekend. That was awesome. Glad to have you here. Mike Duvall, thanks for coming in, buddy. You've been to, I think, all my shows so far. Yeah, this is number 5, so appreciate the support. Ryan, Trappers, Morph Valley, thanks for being here. Boza, saw you this past weekend. That was awesome. I think you got a shirt from like almost everybody. I'm actually repping Royal Serpent's Jamil's shirt. He gave me one at the show. So if you haven't went and followed him, he picked up some heat this past weekend. So go follow him if you haven't already. And we got Greg here. Nice to see you, Greg. Hopefully I'll see you in Tinley. And we got Wiz Constrictors. Saw you as well. That was amazing. If you haven't already gone to Wiz's channel, like and subscribe. A lot of new things coming out. A lot of good conversations and heat going his way. So go shout him out there. We got Amanda, PJ's Creations. Yep, finally here on time. Nice to see you. Marcus, thanks for showing up. We got Dan. Nice to see you, Dan. I saw Dan this past weekend too, him and his wife. It was lovely meeting them. Mike, Chris, what's your business name? It's Neurophi Exotics. So NEUROFI Exotics. Yeah, I should come up. And they'll finish up with Matt. Happy Sunday, Trappers. Yep. Thanks you all for coming in. I'm going to bring up some of the sponsors here. I can find them and see which one before we bring on our guest here. So we have, let me go and take the comment off too. There we go. So we got Blake from Blake's Exotic Feeders. I met him this past weekend at the auction, actually, towards the tail end. So it was great meeting him in person. Really solid guy. So reach out to him for your feeders. As we've kind of talked about, it's good to feed, our animals a variety, and he really does a really good job with his quail and just really high quality. A lot of my friends in the hobby have used quail to get maybe stuff and feeders back on there, but it's good just to give him variety. So go ahead and give him a follow on that. And then we have the chippers. So go to COCODO.com to order your substrate. This is the only chipper bedding I'll ever use. I'm allergic to all the other ones, so use TrapFam 24 to get a percentage off your order. And we also have focused cubed habitats. So if you're looking for kind of a plug and play, really nice, modern, top of the line enclosures for your animals, definitely reach out to them. Great to work with. I know whenever I get into the chondro game, definitely going to reach out to them for their habitats to get started from there. I know you guys watch MJ, of course, and that's all in the background. Just looks really nice, really top quality. Then we got Sundown Reptiles. I briefly talked to them at their table at Daytona. Saw some of their tree monitors, so that was awesome. Definitely look forward to getting a tree monitor someday. But he had a really high quality captive bred. I know he does a lot of variety of geckos too, so definitely if you haven't, go ahead and follow him and to see what all the projects he's coming out with. And we'll kind of follow up with end it with Gary Chavino, GS Reptiles, really heavy hitter in the chondro game. Really go and subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's always putting out awesome content that you guys can learn from, and various species and his adventures and all that. I met him very briefly at Daytona this past weekend, and that was great. So go ahead and give him a follow. Really nice guy, and just really cares about other people learning about these amazing species. And so I'm really excited to shortly bring out our guest, Dr. Danielle. We knew each other a little bit in school. Not my classmate, but it was about a year behind me, but we had some classes together. So I knew she was into the exotic reptile part of her career. So I wanted to bring her on to kind of talk about her experiences, kind of talk vet to vet, back and forth about the industry and some cases she's seen, what maybe we can do as breeders and keepers to make sure animals are healthy, and to go from there. So really excited to have her on here. And
Hey.
How's it going? How's your weekend been?
Busy. I actually worked today. So I, about 30 minutes ago, just extubated a peninsula cooter that I sedated this afternoon at like 2 p.m. So about
Nice.
5 hours. Yeah, about 5-6 hours of manual ventilation for him. He was hit by a bus earlier today, so we had to sedate to do a full exam because he, of course, wasn't going to let me look at his face very well.
Of course
and
not.
I was not going to force him to do that. So he got some good drugs. He took a nice nap and said he wanted to snooze until about, right before we started. He was like, I'm good, guys. So if I go darting off screen, I'm about ready to catch him in case he tries to get on I have a little critter keeper he's in right now. But yeah, he's doing much better. X-rays and everything were nice and clear for him. So
awesome.
He's just going to get some pain meds, some food, and some TLC because he got a little dinged up around his scutes. So,
okay. Yeah. And you said that was a type of slider turtle?
It's a peninsula cooter. So I'm actually in Florida. So I'm one of the native turtles here.
Okay. Very cool. And by manual ventilation, that's just been you for 5 hours, just squeezing like the
little ambi bag like you see.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. How many breaths per minute?
I've been doing one about like every 15 to 30 seconds, a little bit, like as he was waking up and he was breathing kind of intermittently on his own. I was backing off a little bit for him. Since for reptiles, as for their breathing response, they have to have a buildup of CO2. It's actually not oxygen. So giving them oxygen suppresses their response to breathe. So we do just room air on a little ambi bag like you see in ER, the medical shows.
Yeah.
So just kind of breathe for him every 15, 30 seconds for the last few hours.
Huh. Yeah. Wild. Hey, vet work on the weekend though.
Oh yeah.
That's what happens, right? Were you on call or was it just, how's it work?
Yeah, I'm scheduled Sunday through Thursday. So
Okay. So so that's when you're scheduled to work. Okay.
yep.
Okay. Awesome. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what made you want to do exotics, your kind of education you had to go through to get here, and yeah.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Purdue grad, boiler up. So yeah, I do boiler up. So yeah, I did undergrad through vet school at Purdue. As cliche as it is, one of those kids that always knew they wanted to be a vet. So yeah, started off strong there. Have always kind of had exotic pets. So I've had map turtles, Herman's tortoise, leopard gecko, all the way up to a skunk. So not a reptile, but she was great. So always kind of had that kind of theme. And I knew I love dogs and cats, but I want something a little bit more of a challenge. Not that dog and cat medicine isn't super challenging. It's just we don't have a lot of answers for reptile medicine or any exotic medicine. I mean, we have a lot of research and we have a lot of data, but we're constantly expanding. So, and things are always changing, even, in human medicine, 1 year this is the thing to do and 1 year it's not. So I really like the challenge in the ability to do a lot of, research and also learn more about these guys too. So from vet school, I did a lot of, Exotics Animal Club and things like that. I externed at a lot of different zoos during my clinical year of vet school, which was really fun because I got to see kind of the zoo side of things, which is very different than the pet side of things, which is very different from the wildlife side of things. So did that. And then graduated, did a little rotating internship at a specialty emergency practice for dogs and cats. And then after that, I did a specialty internship at an avian and exotic only practice in Indianapolis. Avian exotic.
I spent some time there too before I got into vet school. So Dr. Lennox, right?
Dr. Lennox, yep.
Great. Yep. Go ahead. Yeah.
Small world. Yeah. So no, it was great. So yeah, I spent a year there doing primarily exotic pet medicine, but we also would collaborate with the Indianapolis Zoo as well. So they brought some stuff to us and we'd, kind of work with them too. So it was nice. We had an in-house CAT scan machine. So that was super handy.
That's nice.
Yeah, so we got to do that a lot. So I did that. And then right now I've been here for a whole month. But I started at the Clinic for the Rehabilitation of Wildlife, or CROW, down in Sanibel, Florida. So I'm island life right now.
Okay. Awesome. And so is what you're doing now, is it further training or okay. So it's another internship, or is it
another internship? Yep.
Okay. So yeah, you can already kind of get the gist. In order to go into exotic medicine is a ton of training. I don't think people really realize that. I think people know in our reptile industry that not all vets know about reptiles, right? I mean, in school, in the 4 years, we had like one class. I think that was elective with Dr. Thompson.
One elective, and I think one lecture specifically dedicated to like snakes, and then one to like turtles and tortoises, and then like maybe one to lizards, and it was like all bearded dragons. Yeah, and then so if you didn't like
birds and chinchillas, and so that's one semester for all the exotic animals as an elective is what we get. So you're not even required to take that. Just letting other people know that that's what we were kind of going into right off the bat. And so in order to do, and why do you think there was so much training involved? Is it pretty competitive? I mean, going through school is pretty competitive to do exotics, right? Because there's not a lot of
so yeah, exactly. It's hard because, well, one, there's a lot of different sectors. So if I want to do exotic companion medicine, like that's kind of a field. There are specialties and everything. You can break it down to like a reptile amphibian specialty. You can break it down to an avian specialty, exotic companion mammal, which if you notice my photo is clearly not reptiles. I'm holding my pet chinchillas. But so you could do those, or you can do kind of the ACZM, which is a zoological based one, which kind of covers a little bit of everybody as well, which also includes wildlife too. So you can definitely break it down a lot. But the hard thing is like you said, there's not a lot in school. So you kind of have to go out of your way and either like during school and work at these places or intern at these places to get that experience and to get that training. And you want to get that training from people that are boarded and have done this for a long time, because, they're the ones that are kind of, keeping up with the medicine, and they're, the ones doing the research and writing the books. So it takes a lot of time. And as far as, residency positions, so the positions that are, so generally it goes vet school, rotating internship, meaning you do a lot of different specialties. So you do emergency medicine and surgery and internal medicine, and then you break it down into your more specific things. So your exotics, if you want to do horses, you want to do whatever. And then if you want to go to be board certified, meaning you get the extra letters after your name, you take the hard test and all that, that requires a residency. Typically, you can do it through a specific amount of time that you've worked in the field too. But a lot of people try to do the residency route because it tends to be the quickest, and it also tends to be the one that you have the most mentorship and the most guidance. But that's a 3 to 4 year program on top of the probably 2 to 3 to 4 years you've already spent leading up to it outside of vet school. So from graduation to getting that specialty degree, you're looking at 4 to 8 years, somewhere in between. So it does take a lot. And there's only, for any given specialty, there's probably fewer than 20 positions for the dozens and dozens of people that are wanting to get into them. So it's a long road, it's a long haul, but you get a lot of training and you get a lot out of it too.
Yeah, I'm on more on the lab animal side, and very, very similar. You can do it with experience, but residency, most people do that because it's shorter, right? And then we take a test after if we want to and get the special letters after our name or whatever. But I guess the question I have too is that it's pretty hard to find an exotics vet. Like a lot of the people I'm in groups with, they struggle finding somebody that's knowledgeable. Do you know why that is? Is it just because dog and cat is so much, there's just so much more people that have them, and so it's more of like not very many people with reptiles, so there's not as big of a market on the vet side for that? Like what are your thoughts on that?
So I think it comes down to a couple different factors. So one, I would say up until probably about the last maybe 10, 15, even 20 years, might be pushing it, exotic pets were considered kind of like a novelty. Like you got your kid a hamster, you got your kid a lizard, something like that. They weren't and there's a couple studies that kind of show like people are considering more family members now. So, they weren't always something you'd take to the vet necessarily. You go to the pet store, you buy it, $10, $20 for a pet. People, financially are maybe not going to want to invest that much into them. Emotions have been changing a lot recently, and rightfully so, because I think they're really great. But a lot of people have been spending more time and seeing that there is more intrinsic value maybe to them. Not even financially, because like you said, there's all these different, morphs, and there's specialty, and there's time and energy and money and everything that goes into making these animals.
A lot of money.
A lot of money. So I think now that, so not just because that they're getting more expensive, but I think people are, I think attitudes are changing in pets in general. Because, before, people didn't always take their dogs and cats to the vet even. So I think, attitudes I think exotics are slowly catching up, but they're definitely catching up. So I think people, and I mean, I will see people spend just as much on, heck, their guinea pig, whatever, on as they would their dog or their cat now. So I think attitudes are changing. So I think that's a big part of it. So I think more vets and more people are becoming interested in becoming specialized because there is more of a demand for it now. Because people, you want the best care for your pets. And not to say that those that don't have specialty degrees are not appropriate. It's just some people, the demand isn't there. So they might see, a bearded dragon, a leopard gecko every other month or every couple months. So it's just not something they see in the repertoire a lot. But then there's more people now that are like, oh yes, I've owned these, or I've cared for these. And, so that's becoming more popular. And then I also think that kind of what I mentioned is that there's not fewer, but there aren't as many programs to get that specialty training as there are people that want that specialty training. So getting more of those to be available, and people can do the experience route where they, practice for so long and they can take that board and they can get that extra degree. And then that way, you as a, customer could see and client can see what that is and then know that that person has been specifically trained to care for your pet.
Right.
So I definitely think it having been an exotics only practice, I mean, we were booking month or two out practically. So I think there's a big, and we're definitely in high demand. So, and I think finances for being an exotic vet, especially now doing wildlife medicine, we're a non-for-profit, things like that it's not the most lucrative position compared to.
And touch on that. I think it's interesting, important people know, like in internships and residencies, like we do not make that much. We don't make, I don't know, like I get paid a little bit better because my stipend's through the government. Like I'm on a T32 grant, so I'm on a postdoc salary that increases every year. So as far as residencies goes, lab animal medicines are, I would argue, the best paid. But some of those that are like you guys or people in academia, like I think they've risen since we've gone out of school just because inflation has gone so bad. But like I know graduating school, it was like $20K, right? $30K a year. Yeah. And you're working like 60, 80 hours a week on that in New York or California. Like those, I think they probably increased, like I said, since I've gone out of school the past few years, but these were the salaries all across the US. Like you weren't seeing anything over 50K.
No. And in wildlife, I was just kind of skimming through some of like the wildlife internships comparable to where I'm at now, different programs across the country. And I think the highest paid that I saw, and this was through the internship program, the match, the VIR MP, the highest paid I think I saw was like 37,000.
Yeah.
So it's So it's not where I'm not out here to make the money yet, but I think that's part of the reason is I think there's not as much of an incentive financially for people, and vet school costs a lot of money too. So you got debt and loans and things to pay off from there. To go into it, I right now do a lot of different things, but one of the nicer things is that we actually have housing here at Crow, which is included in our program. So I am here. Nice. Yes, so I am here living quote unquote rent free. Which it really does help, and I'm right on site, so traffic's great. And I even see an alligator walking in some days, which is even better. It's pretty easy there, and it does alleviate some of the burden financially, because like you said, a lot of these places are in New York, in California. I'm in one of the more affluent areas of Florida, financially it helps a lot. And it's actually, I got my own room, so no bunk beds or anything.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. That'll help. Just with, everybody knows like rent prices going up and everything like that. It's been hard. I think that's why people aren't going into it as much, because we've seen on a lab animal, the numbers of people applying for residencies has gone down the past, I would say 2 or 3 years. And I think that's because it's a lot more enticing to go into dog and cat, where they're offering these huge salaries or sign-on bonuses to just go into dog and cat, because they're making it pretty good there, I think. A huge demand. A lot of people, I think it's because of COVID too. A lot of people went out and got pets during COVID, so kind of drew up the demand, drew up the prices for stuff. A lot more, I would say, people taking over. I don't know how the exact word of it is, but buying up practices and stuff, more corporate. So they can kind of entice you to go in with the sign-on bonuses. I think that may be a big reason why people aren't going into it as much.
Sure.
It makes no sense.
Oh, I know. If I open my email on any given day, I've got, X, Y, and Z corporate companies saying, here's a $150K sign-on bonus. Yeah. It's work in our ER for 5 years and it's yours, which, some people that's what they need. That's what they want. And some people thrive on that.
Sounds
I
nice.
don't.
I couldn't do it. No, I think part of it is you have to do what you love. Like, yes, we need money to live. I think most of us as vets we do it because we want meaning to our lives more. We love the animals. We always have. The money is just kind of there, right? We need it to eat and stuff. But it's more of like the passion. And we knew that going, the process of when we interview, they ask us these things. They make sure that, we're in it for the right reason. So if we want to do specialty or something, it has to be like in your heart, and you have to be happy. Like at least lab animal, it's a really good work-life balance. And so that was huge for me. And that's kind of why I went down this path too, because I don't want to be doing the 80 hours.
Yeah.
It's not me. So
yeah. No, and I mean, I think that's important. I don't actually have any on call now, which is really nice. So yeah, we have a system here, which is actually really nice, that we work with local dog and cat clinics throughout, because we're on an island. So anything to get on and off the island's a little bit tough, because there's also a toll to get on the island, or leave one way on or off, one way or the other. There's a fee of $6. So there's a little bit less incentive for people to maybe want to come bring the animal to us directly. So in order to make it a little bit easier for them, we partner with, I believe we have 5 or 6 different clinics throughout Southwest Florida, where we have drop-off locations. So they will actually take in wildlife for us, do like a little triage system. They call us, say what they have. We coordinate a volunteer who actually drives to all of these clinics, picks up everything, and then brings them directly to us during the day. So that works really nice. And then anything after hours, if they can't get to like their clinic that's closest to them, we also have a drop-off center here, actually at the center as well. So we just have some little forms, you drop the animal off, they hang tight overnight, and then we triage them first thing in the morning. So, and then sometimes the police will come knocking on your door because they've got a snowy egret that's dangling from its toe by some fishing line in a tree. So we'll fix that. We actually happened. We amputated one of his toes, and he got released yesterday. So
that's so cool.
Yeah. So you never know what's going to happen.
That's a cool part of it too with exotics. I'm sure is seeing something different every day, and having that satisfaction of being able to release something and cure it type of thing. Maybe we have actually a first question coming up. I'll put this in there. So if you guys have questions, feel free to put them out there. Can you see that, or you want me to read it off?
Oh yeah, no, I gotcha. Are there any vaccines or shots owners should get if they want to own an exotic? Are there laws for exotics when it comes to putting them on a leash? Like, do a turtle need a leash versus a sugar glider? So as far as vaccines, really the big one that I can think of, and it's not a reptile thing, is a mammal thing. So for rabbits, so the RHDV vaccine, the rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus, it is a disease that came from Europe and then now is going into our wild bunnies. And then from our wild bunnies is going to our pet bunnies. So it has a very, very high, like over 90% fatality rate. So that's a vaccine I would definitely recommend. Me personally, the worst, there are side effects to everything. But I think the worst I've ever seen was like a sore, shot site. Like, when you go get your flu shot, it kind of hurts a little bit. That's the biggest deal I've seen. As far as laws for exotics on putting them on a leash, I don't know if there are any leash laws. If you could walk your turtle on a leash, I'd be impressed. But some states, I will say, have laws against what species you can own. So like a sugar glider, I believe, is not, and ferrets are not allowed to be owned in California, I believe. Florida, we have some laws for different exotic or like protected species. So you can actually own a Galapagos tortoise here in Florida, but it has to be bred in Florida and it has to stay in Florida. So you cannot sell it out of the state. I believe if you have it, you can travel with them to another state, potentially depending on that state's laws, like you get grandfathered in, but you cannot sell that pet outside of the state. So it just kind of depends on where you're at. And as far as I know, there are not any I guess rabies vaccines for ferrets. Those are mandatory state by state. It kind of depends a little bit. So ferrets, you want to get a lot of the vaccines you get your dog or your cat. So like their distemper, their rabies. Beyond that, the rabbit hemorrhagic disease virus is a really big one too, because that's a really preventable thing. And it's a really fatal disease. So if we could prevent that, for reptiles and things like that, no, I don't know of any preventative vaccines for you or for them necessarily. There might be some out there. Don't quote me, that don't exist, but I have not routinely done anything for them. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for that question. Going into that a little bit, what are some of your more common cases you've seen, I guess, on the more of the pet keeper side of things, or maybe, yeah, most common? And then what are some cases that kind of stuck out to you that were more like challenging or unique?
Yeah, I would say I would say probably one of the most like challenging species, not necessarily challenging in the sense that it can't be done. I just think there's not a lot of information given to first time owners or newer owners, would be aquatics and aquatic turtles. I would say they're probably the ones that I see for the same kind of issues very frequently. And a lot of them stem back to water quality and diet. So I think there's, you know, you've Googled something, there's a million answers and a million opinions on everything. And I can't say always, oh yes, this is 100% the way you need to do it. This is the only way to do it. There are a lot of different ways to do things. But the biggest thing is making sure, you know, health is priority. So I would say aquatic turtles, one of the biggest things we see are a low vitamin A, so hypovitaminosis A. If you've ever seen a turtle where it's got these nice little pooches behind his eyes, they get those oral or AURAL, not oral like your mouth, abscesses, which are not necessarily infectious, but they're just kind of like white blood cells and skin cells and everything that build up in kind of like their ear canal type area, because they don't have normal vitamin A to help that skin health and everything that they need. And a lot of times I see these in turtles that are fed dried shrimp and fish and, you know, everything but some pellets and some veggies and things like that. So I think making sure that you're providing an appropriate diet, not sponsored, but I love Missouri brand aquatic turtle pellets. But I think they, you know, looking into what you're feeding them is going to be a big thing too, because that can prevent issues down the line. You know, making sure your water quality is good so you don't go, you know, predispose them to things like respiratory disease or, you know, sepsis. You know, so a lot of people have seen, you know, the nice little yellow belly starts turning pink, red, and they start getting sick and not moving around. And sometimes they just float, and, you know, we don't want to see those things. So that would be a really common thing I see. Lizards, leopard geckos with those nice stuck shed over their eyes. Keep them humid. I mean, that's really
humid hide. Because I breed leopard geckos, and now I tell people the biggest thing people miss is no humid hide. So they love them. I love them. They stay in there all the time.
Oh yeah, they love them, and it's such an easy thing. And it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to go to the store and buy a nice, pretty looking rock.
Yeah, I have a plastic Tupperware with little thing cut out on top, and they just crawl into that. Like I think it's 3 cups or 4 cups, easy. That's what I do for mine. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always tell people, I'm like, you don't have to invest financially a ton into all these things necessarily to get them up and going and get them to be healthy. So yeah, humid hides, love them. Sphagnum moss, heck, even get like some sponges, you know, whatever to put in there. Those are big. What are some other good ones?
I mean, it's probably, I'm assuming on the snake side, it's probably respiratory and maybe like blocked lacquer mold glands that you probably get, right?
I've only seen, I had one. He was a leucistic ball. And he had the block duct, and he just had, because the way their eye is, they got the spectacle on the surface, you know, that pretty little spectacle. And then the cornea is underneath, but between that is kind of the tear layer. So it's kind of, the tears are kind of sandwiched in between those layers there. So when those tears, because they can't just, you know, cry like us, those tears don't really have anywhere to go. They just build up and they push that spectacle out and out and out. So yeah, we had one who he just kept building up that fluid. There wasn't like an infection or anything that we really saw. So we didn't know, you know, necessarily if he just had some abnormality or something to those ducts themselves that they couldn't drain properly. That was a one-off. That was a weird case, you know. He ate and everything. I mean, his vision probably wasn't great, but, you know, he lived his best of life as he probably could. But yeah, respiratory issues are going to be number one. You know, too high, too low humidity are big deals. Temperatures, you know, not where they need to be. Pretty much everything, you know, you want to set up, you know, in anything. If you have a rack, if you have, you know, a tank, you know, whatever you've got set up, making sure those parameters are right.
Prevention. Yeah, they taught us that in school. Prevention is a key for a lot of this stuff. For the respiratory infections, I've kind of heard both sides of it. Do you culture, you know, before you prescribe, or do you, what are your, because I know some just do Baytril automatically, but more vets are starting to culture it ahead of time before.
Yeah. I mean, culture is going to be gold standard. And even a step above culture now is it's a company called MyDog, MIDOG. They do something, yeah, they're actually really cool. They're a bit more expensive than a culture, but honestly, you know, for the information that you get, I would say it's definitely worth it. So what they do is they actually do like DNA, RNA testing for specific bacteria. So you give them a little swab, and they also do fungal too. So fungal and bacterial all in one. So you can do a swab and it tells you, here's the 10 bacteria we saw. This is our ranking of priorities. Like, is this likely to be pathogenic? Is this not likely? Like, is this probably something that is a normal like skin bacteria or something? And then they also give you like the genetic readout for what those bacteria are susceptible for, or if they have resistance genes, basically. So you get a really tailored cocktail, basically, that says, oh yes, this, and this are a problem. This is, you know, they have resistance for this antibiotic. So I don't want to use that. I want to use something else. And I personally have seen more and more things are becoming resistant to Baytril.
Scary.
And I loved it. You know, I mean, that was one of the things we went to a lot. And so I think, you know, making sure we're doing something appropriate, because the longer you wait to get an appropriate antibiotic, the more the time that your animal's, you know, sick and things are happening and they're not eating and they're not doing well. So I really like that. But yeah, so that would be top tier. Short of that, because, you know, not everyone has hundreds, especially if you have, you know, a collection that's all sick, you know, and sometimes in those cases, if everybody's sick with really similar symptoms and they all got sick around the same time, you know, we can do kind of like a flock health thing where we culture one of them and presume that the rest are sick with similar things. So that's an option. But then sometimes we do kind of empiric therapy where we pick a broad spectrum that's considered like a first line antibiotic. So one that's, so they have like rankings of antibiotics that are important to both animal and human health, because we use a lot of the same antibiotics. And if we build up resistance to those bacteria and then humans can't use them, then, you know, that doesn't work well for us either. It's bad. It's bad.
Very bad.
So yeah, sometimes we can start with like a low level broad spectrum and then kind of work up from there. But I always, you know, recommend additional testing, just because one, in the long run, it probably will save you money, because if you're not doing repeated visits, repeated different drugs, spending longer time, you know, things like that. I mean, the quicker we can get them better is, you know, generally the best for everybody.
How long is like for the MyDog, how long is the turnaround time for that?
Pretty quick. They're super busy right now, because I actually talked to them not too long ago. So they're, I don't know if they're in the process of like trying to, you know, increase their capacity, but normally about a week. So pretty comparable to like your cultures.
Okay. That's pretty quick then. So yeah, if you catch it early, you have enough time to do that before they, you know, get worse, and know what you can kind of treat them with, type of thing.
Yeah. And I mean, if they're sick, obviously we're going to start them on something,
right?
You know, it will probably be a broad spectrum. And if it works, awesome. But sometimes, and, you know, sometimes we have a fungal component too, especially in like some of our snakes that we see. So, you know, you want to make sure you're catching that too, because antibiotics aren't going to do much for that.
Do you see a certain species for the fungal stuff, or is it just kind of across the board, snakes in general? I guess fungal was new for me. Like, I don't have much experience with that, or knowing that.
Yeah. I won't say I've ever treated one for a fungal infection necessarily. It does come up on the MyDog on occasion, but more often than not, they say it's more likely to be something that is like a environmental contaminant, maybe not environmental contaminant, but something that is there, but not necessarily like pathogenic, not necessarily causing disease.
I see.
So, but it does get flagged every now and then. So
I wonder if it's like in the bedding or something. I know some like COCO brands can kind of like mold or something like that, or maybe they're not cleaning it regularly. They can mold and maybe get away.
And I mean, if they're in a really humid environment and that's not getting cleaned a lot, you know, mold likes to grow anywhere humid. So,
and what would you recommend people how to clean like an enclosure, like just for preventative maintenance? You know, especially people with like larger, you know, collections. What would be most of us, I think. I mean, I do chlorhexidine. Myself, I do like a warm water chlorhexidine. So yeah, when everybody shed, or when somebody sheds, that's when I do like the full clean. Obviously, if they're really bad, I do it. But I usually spot clean, and if they full shed, you know, every 4 to 6 weeks, or I do a full clean, I usually do pretty hot water with chlorhexidine, Dawn dish soap, kind of let it soak for a little bit and rinse it out. Is there something else?
I mean, that's pretty reasonable, you know, and that chlorhexidine covers for a lot of things too. And
Yeah.
that's something you can get easily at the pharmacy.
Walmart, Hibiclens is what I get. Yeah.
Yeah. Epiclens or whatever the other pretty blue bottle that they come in. So yeah, there's those. Some people like to use betadine or the iodine based ones. It's a little bit, you know, everything you want to use, you're going to want to make sure you rinse it really well and let it dry. You know, so I mean, that's the kind of the big thing. And some of these things, you know, even if they're, you know, you wouldn't want it on you when it's wet and active, but if you rinse it really well and let it dry, you know, even if you use like dilute bleach, you know, things like that, as long as you're cleaning it and rinsing it and letting it dry, normally you're okay. But you don't want to use something like really heavily scented or anything like that. I've used Chlorhex, I've used betadine, dilute betadine. Yeah, we call it like a sweet tea kind of color.
Yeah, that's what I tell people to soak. I do like tea color. Yeah,
tea color. Yes, you wanted a nice light tea color. You don't want it, you know, chocolate milk. So or black coffee is kind of what it looks like. So yeah, there's that. I've used what is the other one that we've used?
F10.
F10. Yeah, I've used F10. I haven't used F10, but I know some keepers who do F10. One thing with that, especially because some of them are aerosolized, is definitely making sure your pets are away from them. You know, these guys, especially like our snakes, they've got maybe 1.5 lungs. So they don't have a respiratory system like us. So any little particles, especially anything that has a particle that's a chemical, really can be damaging to that respiratory system. So if you're using anything aerosolized, I always caution that you keep the animals far away from that because you don't want them breathing it in. But yeah, F10 is definitely, it is a very good cleaner.
With F10, it was weird. In another group I'm in, a vet recommended that for nebulization for respiratory infection. Is that, I had people asking me and I was like, honestly, I looked for papers. I couldn't find any papers on that. Is that an old school thing or what is that?
I think it's a convenience thing because it's readily available. It's not terribly expensive, and it is a good antiseptic, or like I guess maybe a good cleaner necessarily. Yeah. I caution against nebulization of anything that isn't, you know, a true medication.
Yeah, like FDA, like well, I would say FDA approved, but yeah, you know what I'm saying,
like saline. Yeah, I mean, just plain saline. Even like, you know, go and take a shower and turn the, you know, heat on, you know, the hot water on so it gets nice and steamy. I mean, nebulize with that. I mean, that goes a long way. Like if you think when you've got a cold or something and you go take a nice hot steamy shower, that helps. I do know people who've done it. I know people who swear by it. I personally have never done it.
Yeah.
I would be cautious to recommend it in the fact that those are things that we intend to, you know, sterilize flat surfaces with. You know, they aren't putting these on wounds. They aren't putting it in eyes and mouths and nose and things like that. So just the potential irritation, and the irritation alone, you know, if those nasal passages and everything get inflamed, these guys don't really do well as mouth breathers. So it's hard for them. So I would be hesitant to say that's something I would recommend. Cleaning your tanks with and washing it and drying it, go for it. I wouldn't nebulize with it.
Okay. Yeah, that was just something I was like, I wanted to ask you. It was about the F10 because I've seen that in a group I was in, and I had no experience with it and couldn't find any papers on it. So I was like, I cannot really support this. So
yeah, that's the thing. And if someone comes out and says, you know what, I did a study, I tested it, it worked great. This is what they looked like afterwards. We didn't have any complications. Love it. But I don't know that we have the evidence for that, and I would just be hesitant because we just don't really know.
Right too. Talking about cleaners and that. Anything you wanted to add more on that?
No, I mean, there are a lot of, decent commercial cleaners, and I mean, things in your house too. I know some people only use vinegar because it's not super caustic, and you know, I think that the biggest part of it is just cleaning the cages, you know, or cleaning the tanks, cleaning your rack, you know, routinely. Just despite what you use, just making sure that things are getting, you know, a good once over pretty routinely is going to help prevent a lot of things.
One other thing that I want to ask you too on a little bit of testing too, and we're more concerned with it on the breeder in this big scale, is Nido. What are your thoughts on nidovirus. We had a pretty good podcast, I think, on my Herb Collector's channel a few weeks ago. He had kind of a specialist come on and talk about it, where the gist of it was it's pretty prevalent in there. It kind of only really arises and causes issues when the snake is, stressed or, in that really unclean, I guess, kind of environment. But I don't know what your kind of thoughts or what your recommendations are for us and testing, because, it's not shed all the time, right? So it's like spending all this time to shed. Ooh, it's not saying it's positive, but that doesn't mean that the animal isn't going to shed it in like a month or two. So
yeah, I will say I have had limited experience with nidovirus. In fact, I don't know if I don't think I've personally tested it. I've done like some like battery of tests, where like I get enough swabs that I can set it up for PCR for whatever.
Yeah.
Just kind of hit all the big ones. I don't have a lot of experience in nidovirus personally. Inclusion body disease, a ton.
Okay.
I would say I tested a decent amount of them for that. They start with the stargazing, they're not eating, regurgitating, kind of things like that. So I would say we saw, we even had like an emerald boa with it, so we had a couple different things that would pop up with it. So boas and pythons, they do get it. And that's something more on the pet side. And, you always worry when you've got a larger collection, if one's got it, one or other is going to pop up with it. So that's something it's hard because there's no treatment, same with nido, it's really either isolate or cull. And that's the hard thing too, because, especially if they start going downhill, you don't want them to suffer, and there's not much we can yet that we know of that we have a lot of treatments or options for too.
And the IBD, or inclusion body, it's called by arenavirus, right? Off the top of my head.
It's got. They've reclassified it a couple times.
Okay.
But I think that's the most recent one I think that has been published.
Okay. And what's that? Is it vector based? Like, I think I've seen maybe mice, but we don't know.
I don't think we really know. I think it's fomites too, as best we can tell. So changing. So I think it's more of like bodily secretions, so like fecal oral. So in the feces and the urates, things like that. There's thoughts that it can be in shed skin. It's one of those things that I don't know that we know it. I mean, it's in the blood, so you can see it in the blood. So I think it's one of those things that we still have to do a lot of research in. But there have been some reports of, snakes that have never been together. But if you're handling one, then you handle the other, then the other can get it too. So I think we can act as vectors as well, in a sense. So biosecurity is going to be number one, especially if you're keeping a lot of different species, because some can have IBD and don't look clinical for anything. And then some can get IBD and then, get very sick and die very quickly. So I think, making sure you're keeping different, your substrates or your enclosure, your like your hides and, if you have foliage and things like that, like not mixing them between anybody. Like once it goes in their tank, that's theirs. And like always washing your hands and changing things out.
Okay. That's how you recommend. Is there any like species that you should be really, really careful of, like cross-contaminating with?
I mean, your boas and your pythons.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like ball pythons, green sheep pythons, and then boas.
Yeah.
Okay. I only have leopard geckos myself, and I still wash hands, but I'm not as super concerned with that versus, Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's interesting they haven't seen a ton of nido or something, because we hear a lot more about that in industry versus the inclusion body disease.
Which is funny. And I will say, like you said, it's kind of something that might be more prevalent than we know. And it might just be something that we're missing. And there's always, things that we can be looking more for. So the lab that we use, I think, tested for it, because I know they did crypto. That's another big one we saw a lot.
It's a big one in the gecko, like leopard geckos, hognoses. I'm learning that it's a huge thing with them. Hognose snakes. I'm not in that kind of world, but I have some friends that say that's a huge thing. So
yeah, definitely the geckos. what did I see it in recently? I want to say it was a king snake that had it recently. So yeah, it kind of pops up randomly. I mean, the geckos are not getting necessarily the snake variants.
Right.
Some kind of cross, some don't. It's one of those things that, but yeah, it is definitely, you know, they just kind of waste away. And like, you've probably seen the little photos of the leopard geckos look like a little stick figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of what they do.
I do some consulting on the side, and I pick up the reptile ones because I just know little. I mean, obviously, it's usually like go to a reptile vet, but yeah, I see a lot of those. The turtle one with the swollen eyes, I see it kind of. So, yeah. So yeah, it's kind of like check for parasite type of thing on the.
Check for parasites, and I mean, and you know, sometimes they come from diet, from housing, you know, things like that, and a lot of times I hear, you know, it's hard to trace back where it came from originally sometimes too.
Right.
So
I actually ordered some testing kits. I'm gonna start testing some of my stuff kind of regularly just to make sure. Some of the stuff I got in was for the geckos were tested for crypto, so it makes me feel
nice.
A little better. But I got some stuff specifically test for Nido too, just to kind of go through and just check things for my own kind of doing, so I can get kind of an idea of if it's in there or if it's not, type of thing. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. But I think it's PCR. I forget the lab off the top of my head, but yeah, so that'll be interesting.
Yeah, I would be interested to see. Yeah, like I said, we didn't test for it routinely. Not to say that we shouldn't have been, you know. So
yeah, and it was interesting. The guy on Mike's show, like he had, at least I think I remember, had his own building, like as pure as biosecurity as you can get. Had a closed collection. I think it was of blood pythons for 5 years. Still tested positive for it. So in that case, there's really not much you can do besides be aware of it, you know, and maybe keep those animals separate if they are, or whole, you know, as we said, that was like the only other.
Yeah, and I mean, and another one as far as infectious disease goes that we saw pretty frequently was adenovirus in bearded dragons. So adenoviruses are the liver viruses, and those come in a lot of different flavors. I mean, box turtles have their own. Some aquatics have their own. Who else gets their own? Trying to think. Bearded dragons get their own, and bearded dragons, some of the turtles and like the box turtles and things like that, we don't necessarily know that it does like a lot of damage per se. You know, there's a couple reports on like some that'll get like inflammation of the esophagus, some that'll have they'll have pretty across the board like some changes to the liver and the liver cells, but they aren't always like clinical for it. So I'm managing one right now who was adenovirus negative, but they're also, like you said, some of them are just intermittent shedders, so you don't always catch it, and you can do all the swabs you want, but if they're, you know, walks like a duck, quacks like a duck kind of deal. And he came from a house that was with another box turtle who is adenovirus positive. So we're kind of presuming that they're both there, and he'll get like this like random kind of edema of like the swelling of the back legs. And we kind of just are assuming that's from the virus because it affects the liver, and the liver makes the proteins. You don't have proteins, fluids just kind of slip out. So that's kind of what we're assuming it's from, because he eats, he's maintaining weight, he's very bright, like otherwise, and I can't unfortunately cure a virus, but and it comes and goes. Some days it's better, some days he's worse, but it's definitely one of those things that I want to know and, you know, want to manage. And especially if this is something, you know, people are bringing into their houses, you know, make sure, you know, especially if you have ones that aren't exposed. But as far as like the bearded dragons go, you know, we see a lot of them, especially the babies, they come in, they're just like, they're puny, you know, they're not
good growers. And
then they'll be like stargazing. I've had one that would just like flip himself over and things like that. So I've tested a lot for that and found a decent number of them with it. But I've also tested ones that have been like clinically normal and they've had it. So, you know, where is it causing a problem? Why doesn't it cause a problem for everybody? I don't know, but that is something we do see. And I worked with a breeder she had a rescue side of things, and then she also had a breeding colony of beardies, and a couple of her rescues tested positive for it. And I was like, you can test your breeder. Like, she's like, they live in separate sides of the house. Like nothing ever crosses. And I'm like, I love it. But if you want to be extra, extra cautious, we can test the others for it. And they actually were good. So that worked out great. So, and her rescues that all lived together, not all of them had it either.
Interesting.
So it's
weird, isn't it?
It's weird. It's weird.
Makes our jobs more complicated for sure.
Yeah.
I think it just goes back to prevention, like good husbandry, right? To keep it at a low, like undetectable level, because there are times of stress, opportunistic infections, and they're going to kind of show the clinical signs, test positive. So kind of thing that was brought up was maybe testing like when you get an animal in after it's been shipped, because that's most likely they're to shed it right, their immune system's down, it kind of has opportunistic takeover. So maybe that's something that people can kind of do too as they start accumulating for the breeder side anyways. Yeah,
absolutely. I will say one of the more common times that we see them is an animal gets sick after you've brought in something new. So something new might have brought something in. And a lot of people now are doing their own quarantines, which is wonderful. Yep. Most diseases we recommend about 30 days in quarantine. And that's great. Other things are, shipping stress. And, especially, a lot of places, and I think a lot of, sellers are trying to be like, hey, look where you're at and look where this is getting shipped to and the temperatures you're in. Because I might be here in sunny Florida, but it's 10 degrees out, in Chicago. So you don't necessarily want to be shipping a lot of things in certain times of the year.
Right.
And whatnot too. So I think a lot of people are getting better about that. And, and no one wants to, an animal that they've raised and spent time and energy into, and then see them not do well and see them get sick and things like that. So, and it goes on the buyer's side too. They got to be cognizant of these things too. Like, do you really want to buy, your hatchling gopher tortoise or your hatchling, Herman's tortoise in January in the East Coast or something like that, So,
and they have pretty good, well, I would say, good shipping guidelines for like heat packs or cold packs. But I think a lot of it, these animals are more sensitive than we give them credit for. So just the change in the barometric pressure, I think, with certain times of the year and certain areas of the country are in, can like set them off. Yeah. I've had a few I've noticed with the ball pythons. I'm in Missouri, and the ones that I get from south, so like the Florida area, I would say the Georgia too, sometimes have given me a little more trouble, like getting back on food when I've gotten them. I think it's just due to the change in the barometric pressure. I had one girl, she was like an adult. I think that the age has something to do with it too. Like they're just, if they've been bred in one place, then you're kind of shipping them to a whole nother barometric change. It just takes them a long time to and she finally got back on food after like forever, but they're a lot more sensitive than people, I think, give them.
Oh, they're so touchy. I mean, especially some balls, you especially if they're newer to you and if you don't know what their setup was like before, like just getting them to eat, some of them only want to eat in like a black, Rubbermaid container, and some want to eat in the tank, and, just knowing what their preferences are too, goes a long way. But yeah, I agree. I think they're touchy. They're delicate, they're hardy, but they're delicate.
It's hard to explain. So it's something at least when I'm selling my animals, to have like a little care sheet for them to let them know how the animal's been, doing, at my place versus going to them. And also I think it kind of helps us as breeders, if we are a lot of us are selling breeder to breeder. So it's very similar, rack kind of setups. But I guess for us selling to pet people, we can kind of adjust them over. Maybe I'm not saying so much a tank, but at least with mine, I've been adding like hides in there or like different things kind of every day to kind of get them used to types of enrichment in there. So that way when they do go to more of a pet home, they're not shocked by the huge tank enclosure and the hides and everything like that. So that's kind of something I've been.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. Yeah, we had actually, she was one of the techs at the dog and cat clinic I was at. Her son got a ball python that was a rehome from, I think she was gonna be a breeder, didn't pan out, whatever. But he put her in this huge tank, loaded her up with all this enrichment, and then she's like, I don't know what to do.
Like, I don't know what these are.
I don't know what these are. And they're like, she's not like exploring or anything. And I was like, work her up little by little, maybe get her a little bit. And she's like, but no, she needs so much space. And I was like, maybe eventually. but like that's not her comfort zone. Like she's a fish out of water right now. She's scared. Like this is huge. So they started working her up a little bit more and more. I think they settled on not quite the like, gosh, I think they had her in like a 50 or something, 50, 60.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was huge. And she's like, it's like half my kid's bedroom. And I was like, okay.
That's giant. Because like in the wild, they're in pretty tight corners. I mean, I'm talking about pythons, but they're like under the ground and tight. Like they like tight, you know, closed off places.
Yeah, they want a good hide. They want something secure, you know.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny. It's like things that seem so nice to us, you know, you might want a nice open floor plan, but not everyone does. So, and I think looking into, you know, what their natural history is, you know, goes a long way too, especially as we're getting some of these more like unique species, you know, some things that are only found in like Guam or like the islands and things like that, like knowing what, you know, their temperatures and their cycles are in their rainy seasons and things like that, especially if you want to breed. I mean, some things only breed in the rainy season. When is the rainy season when you're in Missouri, you know? So
right. So yeah, learning what those animals need is in a captive setting is difficult. But I do think there is a big push towards more captive bred stuff, which is very positive. I think a lot of people are getting like the little tree monitors, and those are I think a little more difficult to captive breed that at least I think of off the top of my head. But yeah, a lot of people are doing those. So it's nice to see that keepers are caring about captively breeding stuff and not importing stuff, because that just wreaks havoc with the disease and all that too.
Yeah, and I really like sunbeams, which if you've never seen them, they're just this gorgeous, like they look like an oil slick snake. They're like this black iridescent. They're beautiful. I think they're from like the rice paddies like out in like Vietnam and things like that. So they're beautiful snakes, but they're really hard to breed in captivity as best I can tell. There's a couple breeders that I've heard of like from the UK. So they're there and they've got, you know, there's a clutch here and there. But a lot of them are wild caught. And you know, then you'll see like in the groups like, hey, I just got this. It's not eating. It's skinny. It's got a respiratory infection and things like that. So I think, you know, until we know how to keep them well, I mean, we can do our absolute best, but we're never going to be their natural environment is the unfortunate part. But I think we've come a long, long ways in trying to recognize that and make new systems. I mean, there's beautiful misters, you know, there's the bioactives. There's a lot of things, you know, when we're definitely improving, you know, and even zoos, you know, they're, you know, top notch, supposed to be top notch for a lot of these guys, and they still struggle. And they've got, you know, researcher upon researcher, you know, and biologists and zoologists on board to try and make everything as best they can. And, you know, sometimes they still struggle. So I think we've come a long ways, but yeah, knowing that captive bred is great and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but yeah.
I'll have to look up the sunbeams because I don't know.
Someone mentioned the sunbeams. Yeah, they do require really high humidity.
Nature for you.
Less than ideal captives is that's for sure. Some people, I've seen them call them, you just keep them in a box of dirt basically, because you get your mulch and you get your coconut husk and everything in there and just keep it super, super moist because they live in rice paddies. So it's really hard to replicate those conditions.
And one thing I kind of want to stem off of that too, I kind of struggle with it too, getting into the breeding side of it. What are your thoughts on breeding animals as far as, you know, we see, I would say there's an overproduction, especially with the ball pythons, which can lead to a lot of them being rehomed or showing up at the doorstep or just thrown out, unfortunately. Like people just don't care. There's crappy people just letting them loose type of thing. So what are your, you know, thoughts on, you know, breeding these animals? Should we be breeding them, or should we just be really cognizant of how much we're breeding and that type of thing? It's kind of a loaded question, but I've kind of struggled. I've kind of struggled with it myself as I'm a vet and knowing what happens, but also wanting to breed too. Yeah.
I will say I've been a breeder not for reptiles, but I had ducks, which is completely out of, you know, left field, but I had ducks for a number of years, and just kind of being, like you said, it's being cognizant of your own capacity, because when you get overloaded, you're not able to provide the care that you would want necessarily. So I think being cognizant of that. I went from 6 ducks to 36 ducks in a year. So they were having a great time, but my incubating skills were a little too good. So I will say, being cognizant of what you have in your capacity and, financially too, because they take time and money, and, and if things are, not going well and someone gets sick, and, sometimes, respiratory infections can be infectious, so they can spread too. So being cognizant of that. I don't think in and of itself breeding is wrong, especially in the sense that we'd have to either wild caught, get them wild caught or breed. So I think the line that we are kind of towing is, are we breeding for ourselves or them? And I think the big priority should always be, their health. We see some of these morphs that are prone to seizures. We see morphs that are prone to, like the spiders, that have the shapes of their inner ears aren't normal. So they don't know which way's up. And you see them really neurologic. They can't hunt. They can't do well. That's a hot topic. I know.
Believe me, it is.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Your comments are going to be blown up here.
No, it's yeah. And I've struggled with that too. Is should we breed? And the hard part is like not all of them show it, right? So it may be like a lineage thing where, but I mean, as far as breeders, we've all kind of hit it on the head. Like not many of us are breeding the spiders because of that, because of that stigma. So even though it's interesting, other morphs that will get that, but they don't have the same stigma as the spider. So it's this huge thing. But
spiders are definitely like the poster child for it.
They're
definitely the poster child for it.
Unfortunately.
So, and I think sometimes it takes time to really recognize and like find the pattern between what's going on. You don't always carpets and enigma leopards. Enigma leopards too. Those guys are pretty good.
And the
here in the comments I said.
The lemon frost tumors too on the that's a hot topic too. I'm breeding
so those. I think communicating between breeders goes a long way. If you're seeing a problem, and like you said, a lot of times you're selling breeder to breeder. So when you kind of recognize things and say, hey, this morph is doing this thing, or hey, this morph's doing that, are you seeing that with yours too? That goes a long way too. And, if we're able to breed those out, or just say, what, maybe we stop with that line, I think that's a good practice to have too. But I agree. And I mean, it goes a long way, even like the dog and cat side of things, we've got shelters getting overrun with dogs and cats, but, some people are always going to want, I want a breed that I know what it's going to be like. You generally know what the temperament of a ball python is going to be versus like a carpet. They're not the same snakes. So I think there's a degree of that plays into it too. And having reputable breeders is always going to be, the best thing to do, and knowing that they know what's going on, and that one, especially if you're new to it, having them to like do some coaching, do some mentoring, and say, hey, this is what I do, this is what works, or, if they're not eating, this is what I fed, and things like that, versus, sometimes you get them and, you buy the animal and then you never hear from the breeder again. And I think that's kind of annoying too, on the pet side of things, because they come to us, in a vet clinic, and they're like, I don't know, like I bought it because it looked cool. And then that leads to a lot of trouble too.
And I think some of us are trying to at least switch over to a record system that we can kind of like send over, where we can have like literally like a little QR code on the cup that they take it home with. They can stick it on the tank and they can scan it, and it brings up the animal's lineage, their feeds, their weights, like everything you want to know about this. So that's something I'm going to do too for that reason. Because I've heard some, they just go straight to the vet, won't reach out to the breeder about it, because you guys don't know what we fed or how we kept it.
I can make a million recommendations. That doesn't mean any one of those are gonna work for that animal. But no, I love the idea of a QR code, and like I said, you guys have worked with them and you've known them, a lot of them, since they've hatched, so or were born or whatever, depending on what species you're working with. So I think that goes a long way too, and having an open relationship or communication line with where they come from and things like that goes a long way too.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting you brought up, breeders are seeing issues they should tell other breeders because sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Because at ball pythons, like you probably know there's so much money in some of these
Oh yeah.
projects that if they let that out, the people who bought into that, like it's not going to be good, right? But it becomes like an ethical thing, and maybe not jumping on the newest morph train unless you understand its possible limitations. But it's so difficult because if you jump on it ahead of time, you get a better return, right? Because you can breed and get ahead on the project. It's very difficult. But yeah, hopefully people are more ethical on that standpoint on bringing up genes that they find out just are either lethal or maybe don't get the best odds with or low mortality or something like that.
And I mean, and I can stand here on my high horse because I have no money invested in any of them, but I definitely, so I think it is hard because people have livelihoods at stake as well.
Like hundreds of thousands of dollars spend these things. It's crazy. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, exactly. And as long as it's hard, and you don't want to admit, it's like someone went and bought a brand new car, you don't want to say, oh yeah, by the way, it doesn't start.
Right.
So,
Same thing. Yeah, I think it was like I think the banana was a big thing too, like knowing it was sex linked for a while, but people were trying to figure out that whole thing. That male, I don't know how it goes exactly, but the whole sex linked banana thing. So it's interesting. Checking in for see if I have any questions before I kind of move on to another topic. Yeah, nature for you. People will not behave ethically and money is involved, unfortunately. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. And I think that's where I will say there are some pet insurances that exist. It's not come far enough and financially stable enough that I would say I would recommend it for breeders yet. They will, I think Nationwide's the only one that'll do tiles.
Yeah. That's what I tell people.
I don't even know if they'll do it. They're kind of hit or miss, and they rolled back a lot of their policies and things like that. I'd even have to go look if they even take reptiles anymore. I think they do.
I think last time I checked, that's where I refer people to.
Okay.
Online is Nationwide, so at least a couple months I think they have insurance.
So, yes, it does get because if you're paying per animal and you've got dozens or hundreds, realistically, that gets expensive. But maybe for your really expensive ones, maybe that's worth the investment if something happens.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know. Heck, how an insurance company would say, like, how they break it down for like, oh yeah, French Bulldog's going to have the X, Y, and Z problems, so we're not going to cover those. How they know that necessarily per like each morph can be very different. I have no idea how they know that. So
there was no way.
Care. There's no time. So, maybe that would be an avenue in the future that would be something to look at that could provide at least a little bit of a safety net for breeders going forward. Because as long as people, you want the best care, but also the caveat is this is people's livelihoods too. So, but I think, doing the ethical thing, the thing that you can, that's best for them is going to be the best thing down the line for everybody.
So this comment, let me see. This person, most reptiles off-label optical. Seem covered by actually.
Oh, okay.
You mean the insurance?
I think the insurance. The insurance isn't covering it. I can't speak to that. I had a few clients who had it, mainly for their bearded dragons, and they didn't complain to me, at least, that it wasn't covered. I've never had it for an exotic pet, so I can't quite speak to that. But it would be something to look into and ask them about. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure how they would, like, what they would consider off-label necessarily.
With vet procedures, I had a couple questions. I had a couple topics I want to talk about that too. One of them is egg binding, at least for me and more the pythons. Like, what is your kind of recommendation on, like, is there anything that we can do at home for that, or is that just an automatic? Like, what are your thoughts on that as like a vet perspective?
I will say in the last year, I did not see, actually, trying to think we had one egg bound. What was she? She was a rat snake. She was at she was like an education center for like a nature preserve kind of deal. So they weren't intentionally breeding her, they were slugs, but so she did that, but really we just recommended, making sure she's got like a nice, good, dark, secluded hide for her and like give her space. And she eventually was fine. I will say snakes were not the most frequent ones that I saw in really any of them. Bearded dragons were very, very high up there for just kind of follicular stasis in general. So they never even actually made the shelled eggs. They just made all the yolks and then their body was like, I don't know what to do from here. So like you'll see these like females and they're just like these huge abdomens. And you pop a little ultrasound probe on them and it's just like circle and circle and circle of all these follicles just taking up all their space. And some of them even come in like in respiratory distress because they're just like their lungs can't expand. There's just too much egg in there or yolk. So for those guys, a lot of times I will, if they're not in distress, like they're not obviously ill, like they're just doing their thing, maybe they're pacing, they're trying to find their space, they're glass surfing. There's a couple links, I think it's through like Reptimag, and I think there's one through the Association of Reptile Vets, ARAV, about like how to kind of set up like a nesting box kind of deal. So, for your beardies, it needs to be sand, it needs to be dark, they need to be able to dig around and do their thing. So if they're otherwise healthy, I start them with that, give them like a couple weeks, month, depending, as long as they're still doing well, and kind of go from there. Sometimes after that, some people do, if they're shelled eggs, there's some people do like oxytocin, like they do in people. Reptiles don't always respond to that because they don't have the mammal hormones. So that's kind of hit or miss. But I think, trying to provide them those spaces and giving them time goes a long way for some of them. Some of them need surgery, and that's the rough part of it.
Yeah, that's the part. And yeah, I was thinking of my friend. It was MJ, of course. He had like trying to think he's gonna kill me when he hears this. I don't know what happened exactly. I don't know what species it is. Don't kill me. But he had like, I think it was an Amazon tree basin. I don't know. It was an arboreal species, and the animal had a slug in there, and it was, or an unfertile egg or whatever, and the babies, it was stuck in there, and so the babies were behind that. And
and they're all just
He had to like cut it open and get the slug out, and the babies came after, and they were all dead, unfortunately. Yeah. And he had been watching her like all day, just really worried. So it seems like it's a pretty quick thing, right?
Well, like, especially because it sounds like the one you're saying is a live birth species, right? And those guys are quick. The ones that lay the eggs, you generally, because they're fertilized, but they're not like developing yet necessarily. So those ones you worry more about the mom. And those guys you tend to have more time with, unless they are, coming in like, in respiratory distress, they're not breathing, they're open mouth breathing, they're turning colors, like the beardies love to get these big black beards, those kind of things. And sometimes they get liver disease from it even because they get their cholesterol because they're trying to pour all these nutrients and everything into these eggs, but they can't develop them all the way. So they get like liver disease and things like that from them. So the egg layers, they tend to have more time to kind of by themselves with, especially like our turtles and things like that. They hang on to those eggs for a while. But our live bearing species, it can, when those babies are ready, they're ready kind of deal. So I will say those are definitely a more emergency. And that's where going when you have like a good relationship with a vet, which I admit there are scarce vets that will even consider touching a snake, let alone trying to do surgery on a snake.
Right.
So I know that's definitely a scarcity. The clinic I was at, my mentor, she is the only board certified reptile or exotic specialist in the state of Indiana.
Wow.
So not that there aren't tons of other vets that see them, which there are going to be practice only, because she was exotics only. Because like some vets may have some of these extra credentials, but they're not exotics only. But we were the only exotics exclusive. And I mean, we had people come. We were in central Indiana, in Indianapolis. We had people from Michigan. We had people from Kentucky. We had people from Ohio. And that's a really hard thing, because, you know, if it's an emergency and you're 3 hours away,
right,
you know, what do you do? And that's when, like you said, you kind of resort to doing it yourself, because you don't really have a better option.
And that was going to be my next question, because there's some people out there that do procedures on it. A lot of people like kind of hate on that. And as a vet, you kind of have to I see kind of both sides of it, right? I feel like people should not kind of take things in their own hands, but in some situations you have to physically do that yourself. So you're saying that those kind of situations where it's kind of dire need and there's
and I mean, I won't say I advocate for it, but I mean, and there's some kind of situations where, it is just really, it is really hard. And someone here I see commented that, on the ARAV site, so the Association of Reptile Veterinarians, they can pop that up there. Oh, there it goes.
I have, when I do consults, I send that candy.
You can check that out.
It's in my computer right there. I use it every day.
Oh, wow. Oh man, look at all the people popping up in the comments with those links. Yes, I love it. Because those are people that are comfortable and trained in dealing with these things. In some places, like my clinic, we would do consults, for other vets, and even, to like owners, and say, like, because we had people, heck, it was 3 a.m. and a lady in New Mexico called me about her sulcata. So, you get like that. And like, obviously I was in Indiana. I was nowhere near going to be able to help her unless she flew out to me or drove to me. So, but it was nice that I could give her this resource, and she was actually able to find someone about probably still an hour away, but that's, way better than, her other options. And that's kind of where you talked about, like, the vet shortage itself, goes, makes things a lot harder for people. Cause I want to say, come to me, we'll get it all fixed. Don't worry about a thing. But when you're 3 states away from the nearest person that would even try and touch a reptile, it gets really hard. Yeah. So, and having a relationship. Yeah, go ahead.
Or I was gonna say, or the vet's like, sorry, we're booked up for the next 2 months. We can't see you. And you're like, my snake's giving birth. Like, I cannot wait that long. So, yeah.
The nice thing where we were at was that we had a veterinarian who was dedicated to only doing emergencies. So the rest of us would either, be on surgery, be seeing appointments and things like that. But there was a person dedicated to just seeing emergencies. So if anyone called in and said, hey, this is going on, I can be there in 30 minutes. We're like, great. And sometimes it is, if it's not like an urgent emergency, like, hey, he's just kind of punky, he's got some stringy saliva, we're like, cool. We can kind of work through some of those things. We even had overnight 24/7 on call assistance. So if you wanted to come in, and we would come in, like I said, 3 a.m. seemed to be my most popular time to get called in, would be 3 a.m.
Yeah. On a Friday at 5.
On a Friday. Yeah. So we would do that, but it's especially if you're thinking of getting into this and you're like, I really want to be, a top-notch breeder. I want to have a lot of animals and things like that. Like, one thing I would say to consider is see where you're at geographically with the people that can help you. Be that other breeders, be that veterinarians, be that, sometimes universities will see them. So I would say, be cognizant of that too. And don't get yourself in a rut too. If you have time to kind of think about it, and, some people get themselves set up and they've been doing it for years, and then the vet retires or the vet goes to another practice, and then they're stuck. So I feel bad for them too, because I've had a lot of people say, like, I went to X, Y, and Z for a lot of years. They're not there anymore. What do I do? And that gets tough too.
And that is huge. I brought this up in another episode too, of trying to be, say, a little more responsible. Like, when you're getting into this, I see in the dog and cat too, like, people will get a puppy, and I consulted, and they were like, the puppy like wouldn't eat the food they were giving him. Like, why don't you just try different? I don't have like the money to try different food. But I'm like, why didn't you like think that ahead of time before you got the puppy, right? It's kind of like the same thing. Like before you kind of get into this, and if you're doing this on a mass scale, kind of have you have your mind. If this animal gets sick, what's going to happen to it? And I see on the pet side too, people get reptiles and get sick, and they're like, they just don't like them. Why did you get, you know what I mean? Why did you get the animal if you did you just not think they were ever going to get sick or something like that? I don't know. I don't, as a vet, I don't quite, you know, of course we're biased, right?
Yeah. very, very biased, but understanding. Yeah.
But, you know, that's why I just say to people to kind of have a backup or at least plan for that. You know, especially on the pet side. Yeah.
And I've heard, unfortunately, more than on one occasion, you know, people that they will splurge and they will buy the multi-$1,000 animal and be like, oh, well, all my money went into buying it. And I'm like, that's great. But, and they're like, oh, he doesn't like to eat this. He only wants to eat this, or, you know, and that's too expensive. And, you know, I'm like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. It's so hard. It's like, well, you kind of, should have thought about it beforehand, but we can just be there for the animals, and that's all we can really kind of do.
Yeah. And we worked really closely with a couple rescue groups. So we also, you know, we had a lot of handouts and things like that, just kind of general things, you know, like we even had some videos, you know, of people like how to, you know, transition from live to frozen thawed and things like that. Cause, you know, there's risks of doing that and for everything too, another, you know, hot topic, but you just trying to get resources that are reputable to people either beforehand. We would even do pre-purchase consults. So if you were considering getting, we did them a lot for like weird things. So like people that were like getting wallabies and coatimundis and things like that. But we would do it as a free kind of service where we just kind of, and it was like a Zoom call. So, you know, we just kind of say like, hey, I'm thinking of getting, you know, a boa constrictor, you know, a carpet python, something like this. What do I do and how do I do it? And we kind of talk through like, okay, well, are you able to take care of, you know, a larger breed or like a retic or something? Like, can you house that when it gets to be its full size? And, you know, it's cute when it's a nice little sandwich container, but you know,
massive.
They get huge and they eat a lot and it's expensive. Are you ready to feed that thing a rabbit? Because if you're not ready to feed it a rabbit, then, or like, you know, quail or things like that. I had one lady, she got some kind of lizard. I don't remember. I think it might have been a beardy or something, but it was because like beardies, they do their greens and they do their insects and whatever. But she didn't like bugs. So she
like dried stuff or like the pelleted. They do like a pelleted thing they sell.
And it's like this dust. And I'm like, you got an animal that eats insects. So,
well, the problem is like the pet stores sell.
They do, and that is a big problem. Yeah,
that's the most frustrating thing is that the big box pet stores sell stuff that is not conducive to the animals' well-being. It's so frustrating. Like the red, like you understand, like the red lights are like a no, right? They will like disrupt their like behavioral. They're not. I'm talking about like the red heat.
Yeah, the heat lamps, red lights.
Yeah, like those are like. Oh yeah. You know, I talk to people all the time. They're not recommend. And I get their confusion because you go to the pet store and it's
there
for sale. They have the diet for sale. They have people telling you that this is how you care for the animals. I think that's a big part of the issue.
Oh yeah, there's misinformation everywhere. And I mean, it's a box store. It's a pet store. You know, their name in the game is selling these products. You know, and I think. In having one of our nurses, our technicians, she actually worked for one of the bigger pet stores in the area. And she's like, having come from there and then seeing the side effects of what they were kind of pushing, they, you know, it kind of shows up and it's like, oh, this is what they're doing. And like the handouts that they give you and they're like, oh yes, your leopard gecko, it's totally going to want a salad. And you're like, no.
Why? It's so I don't understand. You think, I mean, does PetSmart not have, they have vets, right? Because if an animal you take
that's a great point. A lot of the built-in pet stores, the built-in clinics in the pet stores will not treat the pets that are sold at the pet store, unless they're a dog or a cat.
Mind blowing.
Which is the wildest thing to me. One, they'd save themselves money, and two, like, would it not just be easier? But we, the exotics practice I was at, we worked with like a network of pet stores, and you know, some of them were like, you know, we ran it through the higher ups. They say, do whatever you need to do, get them fixed, get them, you know, do all the diagnostics, do whatever, hospitalize, do your thing. And that was wonderful. We'd have some that are like, nah. And they're like, well, we tried to get our vet to do it, and like they'd bring us something that's like obviously dying, and we're like, I would be happy to go through a phone call with them. Like they're a vet, they have the pain medications, they have the medicate, like the methods of appropriate euthanasia. Like this could have been a phone call and not an hour-long car ride to us. So it is really really interesting when they're like, oh yeah, no, our own vets, you know, we try to get them to see something and they won't. And that's frustrating for a lot of reasons, because they're there, you know. You'd think,
I don't understand. That's a huge, you'd think these big stores that preach animal care, health, well-being, no, I don't think so. Otherwise you wouldn't be pushing those products that aren't for the animals or selling sick animals. Because when I do the consults, they're like, yeah, I just got this beardy yesterday from PetSmart, and its poop is like all liquid. It's not like, if they see me a picture, I'm like, it's clearly sick. And I'm like, that wasn't your doing. You just got the animal, right? That's, you know, had parasites and all of that. But, you know, and they're like, well, PetSmart won't take it back. They say to go to a vet. So, So there's a huge, I don't know. You would think PetSmart has vets, but I don't know. Like,
and some, some in like, like I think it's is it Banfield that's in some of them?
I think it is Banfield.
Yeah.
Dog cat. I don't know about
dog cat. Yeah, which is, you know, convenient for that. But yeah, it's interesting when you're at a place that has these guys and you don't want to do anything with them. But I mean, I would also say, you know, I'm kind of glad that they would just refer it to someone that they know is capable of doing it instead of trying things themselves. Which is another caveat, because I'd rather you don't want me touching your horse. I promise you that.
No, me either. Don't come to me by your horses.
So
no.
You know, I had a family friend. She sent me photos of her horse's X-rays, and she's like, "What's wrong with its foot?" And I was like,
"No,
I don't know."
Mention that.
Yeah. So send me photos of, you know, your rabbit in GI stasis. I can do that, but don't send me your horse's hoof. Like, I can't help you there. But I think knowing our own limitations, and I know some people, you know, like people have kind of mentioned, you know, making sure that, you know, you're going to someone who, they say they might see these things, but they might not be comfortable, you know, as comfortable or as versed in things like that. So I think it's important to kind of, you know, be cognizant of that and what their comfort level is too.
And maybe it does go back on the person seeking the care to just add it to make sure that where they're taking the animal, that, you know, person has the experience, right? Which makes it also challenging if there's not.
It makes it challenging.
There's so many sides and challenges to it. So it's kind of working out, you know, what works best for the individual situation.
There's so many things to consider. That's for sure.
Is this your husband?
That is my husband.
That's hilarious. Just because they're chinchilla picking pie doesn't mean the other day we'll let you feed chinchilla.
Yeah, no. I would not advocate the feeding of chinchillas to anything, mainly because they're all fur. So that just sounds like a problem.
Not much meat to it.
Not much meat to them, but my two, though, if they misbehave a little bit, he might make them a snack for somebody.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, we jokingly say that about our cats if they like.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we only have ball pythons, so it's like they aren't gonna do anything.
They're not gonna do anything.
I toy with the idea of getting a big snake and be like, "Hey, you guys act up. I'm getting them.
Yeah, right.
I'll feed you too, so you better cut it out."
Yeah.
It's funny. This issue is poor information, poor training, poor products. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also too that there are good products out there, but not every product is appropriate for every species. So like our carnivores, you know, you're not going to go, or our obligate carnivores, or like our leopard geckos, our insectivores, you know, you're not going to give them a supplement that has vitamin A that they can't process, you know. So a bearded dragon to a leopard gecko, their supplements are going to be different. You know, they might all say multivitamin with calcium, but they can't do everything with it. And then that goes into, you know, branding. So, I mean, advertising and everything like that. So I really like, I'm not sure if you've used it, but the Repashy brands.
Heard of it? Yeah.
So
your Crusties. Yeah.
Yeah. For Crusty, or they do a lot of different supplements and things like that. So I like them, and they also do like gel diets and stuff, like you said, like for the Crusties. I like them because they break it down like per species for some of them. So they even have some for like our arboreal species, like our shade dwellers. So like some of our chameleon species and things like that, because they've got lower vitamin D for them because they're not going to be getting a lot of those intense UV rays and things like that. Whereas like, you know, a bearded dragon would. So I think that's nice. And there's a lot of science and everything to go into that. You know, there's not a lot of papers on, you know, specifically saying, you know, this animal can or can't digest this mineral or vitamin appropriately. So we need to do this for them. So I think that's, you know, and that's a hard part too, because you're like, this is a good product, you know, it works really well, but it may not, and we just don't know until an issue arises down the line. So
with information, I've seen the ARAV have like care guides out there. Is that what you would recommend for people to kind of like I print them off when I sell my leopard geckos out. I usually give, you know, if they're new keepers or something, or at least tell them where to look on the ARAV or something, or they can reach out to me with questions, but you get the gist of. So you think that they're pretty reputable? I
do. Again, I'm a little biased there, but they are collaborations, and there are some things I tweak on there, and I add some stuff. So I won't say, and they don't have guides for every species, especially if you're getting, you know, some unique ones and things like that. I think they have like, it doesn't, like one of them I think is just like tegu. It doesn't like break it down beyond that. So I think it's a very good starting point, especially like for your general, like your humidities, your temperatures, reminding you to soak a lot of them. You know, things need water. I cannot tell you how many people that have a bearded dragon that I'm like, just put a water dish in there, you know, even if you don't see them drink from it, just have one in there. It'll make me feel better. And you know, your beardy will probably appreciate it. And I've had a lot of people afterwards that are like, oh yeah, I put a nice big, like shallow dish for her and she's in it all the time soaking herself. And I'm like, great, fantastic.
Need water.
Yeah. So clean, nice water. So I think they're a really good starting point, and they're vetted by all board specialties. So people that have either taken their residencies or done this for, you know, 10 years or so, that have taken the exam to prove that they know these species well. And it's vetted by them. So it's information coming from people. And some of these people have master's degrees, or, you know, you're, you know, doing a PhD or something like that. Like, they know these guys. So it's good information from reputable sources. And like I said, they're not all, you know, cut and dry. Not every, you know, handout works for everybody.
Right. But we can tweak it a little bit, but it's better than your PetSmart, you know.
It's
trackable things. So,
or, you know, you got your teenager in the back who, you know, was skimming through the internet and said, oh yes, you know, let's give our ball pythons, gosh, I don't know, lizards to eat or something like that, you know? So.
Yeah, it makes sense. And there's a lot of information out there. So yeah, it's hard as a new breeder or a keeper or anything like that, getting in on what to listen to and who to listen to. It's sometimes good to people who've been doing it for a long time, for many generations. People have learned a lot, and they've learned how to do, you know, certain procedures and stuff like that just from their experience.
Oh yeah.
So is there one question I came up to, is there probably isn't, but there probably isn't like a resource on procedures or anything like that out there?
Yeah, there so depending on what you want. So there's a couple. So maters, which is the giant. So are you doing like vet specific or like owner specific, or like breeder kind of things?
Kind of either or. I'm talking about for like maybe people that have some of these issues come up, if they're in a dire need and they cannot go to a vet, to at least try something, you know.
Yes.
The mind.
So Maters, M-A-D-E-R-S, Maters, it is this like monstrous thick book, but it is of the reptile medicine and surgery. Some of it goes into very specific things, you know, like endoscopic procedures and things like that, which don't do that at home.
Yeah, don't do that at home.
But it goes into a lot of like really common things we see. So like in our frogs, it talks about the corneal lipid deposits that they get and things like that, which are one of the more common things we see for them. Don't necessarily know why we get it or why they get it, but you know, we can look into some things. So I would say that's a really good one because it also covers like infectious diseases and things like that. It also covers kind of basic husbandry. So even like the whole like first like 3 or 4 chapters are like, this is a turtle. This is what a turtle shell should look like. These are the organs that a turtle has, and it breaks it down really well too. So I think that's something good. And, you know, even as like not someone, you know, that has a doctorate or not someone that has been a breeder for 20 years, you know, I think it's, current therapies and reptile medicine. Yep. That one's good.
On top of it.
I know. I'm like, do
I'll look up after I'm done. Be like, be on so many days, man. Appreciate it.
So those are really handy, and I think, you know, for someone that's even newer into it, and honestly, even someone that's newer into it, it might even be more helpful because it's solid information, and you know, each chapter is done by people that have done it for a long time. I actually just yesterday, the editor for Maters, Dr. Divers. He was here at Crow, and he had some Galapagos tortoises that were part of a breeding program that we were actually able to endoscopically sex. So they can tell these guys were 1.5 years old. They were all of 2 pounds each, about yay big. They were adorable. So we had those guys so they can get their breeding program. Not that these guys are going to be making babies until 20 years from now, but so they can kind of plan and say, oh yeah, these are all my boys. You know, I don't need any more of them, but my ladies are running kind of low. And instead of when you reach, you know, 20 years down the line, you're like, oh shoot, you know, nobody's laying eggs. That's kind of nice too. And then we can kind of work on that side of things as well. So I think that's a really handy book. And they're, you know, the people are really helpful in the community, I think too. So that's a great book. ARAF has a lot of resources too. That's kind of the big one. And then some people have like specific books like by species. I work a lot with gopher tortoises right now because they're native here. And there's like, gosh, I think just on the shelf, there's like 3 different books dedicated to gopher tortoise medicine. So you can get, you know, down to like niche level of things. But I think a good, and I will say that Maters is kind of limited in some of the research just because you can't fit all of the information in one book and make it readable. But it's a good starting point. And then they also have their own sources and papers that they cite and things like that. So, you know, if you are one of those people that really wants to do your own research, you know, start there and then see who these people are citing, see who these people are getting their research from, because those are things that have been tested, and they're not just, you know, a one-off, hey, I saw this is what I did, it worked kind of deal, but a little bit more, you know, back work for it.
Fantastic. Trying to see. Oh, sorry. No problem. No, but we love this, and I love being active and jumping in. It's fantastic. No, you've been awesome tonight, so thank you for that. But we're coming up on, man, this has gone by super fast.
It has.
We're coming up kind of on the end. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but you're super busy and work today. So, but is there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to talk about? I definitely need to have you on again because there's so much stuff that we could.
Oh my gosh, so much.
In the future. I feel like I didn't touch on anything, even though it's been like 2 hours.
Yeah, we talked to like, I think a lot of, you know, good broad topics for people, like, you know, even just disinfecting things. Like that's such an important thing. But, you know, everyone really delves into the like high level medicine, you know, like what do you do for nidovirus? But let's back it up a little bit. Let's start with good biosecurity. Let's start with, you know, getting animals from reputable sources. So I like that we started kind of at like a little, you know, we're getting it going kind of deal.
Yeah. Just thinking about these broad picture, what makes sense logically. Of course, you can get nitty gritty, but what makes sense for what we do.
Yeah.
Breed, keep.
Yeah, exactly. And everything's a little bit different, what works for one person doesn't work for another person kind of deal. So I think, kind of what I mentioned is, making sure you're following their natural histories. You're making the environment as close to it as you can. If you're having trouble, reach out to people who've been doing it for a while. They've been doing it for a while. They've probably been doing a lot of things right,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot to learn. Just because things work doesn't mean that it's, we don't have published things on everything.
Right.
There's so much studies coming out, and as much as we know, there's so much we don't know. And not for lack of trying, but it's just it's an evolving field, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. So be patient with us. If we tell you we don't know, that's probably a better thing than me just saying, you know what, I'm going to treat it like this because it worked in this thing, but it doesn't always work in everything. So if you ever with, a breeder or a keeper or a vet or somebody that says, I don't know, but I'm going to look into it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good place to be, because saying that everything is you don't. You might know a lot, and some people are way, way above me in a lot of these things that they do. I'm sure you could tell me way more about, leopard gecko, breeding and husbandry and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I could do the sick side of things. I could do the surgery side of things. So I think the collaboration between everybody's strengths is where it comes in handy. Because if you have a hog nose that's not eating and you're like, oh, I throw a little frog juice on it and he's good, great. But, not everybody, that side of things, breeders oftentimes know the side of things a little bit differently than us. So right. I think the collaboration and it's a team effort. We all want everyone to be, happy, healthy, make babies, make money. We want everyone to be, living life. But, it's a team effort. So
I love that. Finish up and see if anybody has questions. One thing I do at the end is I have like a pay it forward question. So the previous person is asking, what aspect of animal care would you like to see improved in the hobby?
Ooh. Well, that's a loaded one.
You don't have to go so much. You probably hit on some of it. I know it's a little
Yeah, I think trying to, and as someone who loves the beautiful, flashy things, I think being cognizant of our, where the lineages and things that we're making, and making sure that we're making healthy animals is really going to be my biggest thing. I see some beardies that are, oh gosh.
Probably red dragon.
Yeah, like so the scaleless ones and things like the leatherbacks, things like that. Okay. And I've seen cancer in a lot of them just because they don't have normal skin really. Do they look cool? Yeah, they do. Are their personalities great? Yeah, they're exactly what I'd want in a beardie. And a lot of those things aren't things that we would notice until, we're 5-10 years down the line. So I think being cognizant of, things that we're tweaking and how they're affecting animals and the people that, buy them, the owners. People get invested in these animals. I couldn't tell you how many people probably cried harder for the loss of their pets than they have family members. So I think being cognizant of, yes, this might not be something you see, a week from now, a month from now, but if we're breeding things that are making problems down the line and the repercussions of that, I think we need to be cognizant of that.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. It's a fantastic answer. And what question would you have for the next person? I give a little tip. It's a leopard gecko breeder, so I'll give you that help.
Leopard gecko breeder.
Yeah.
Oh man. I guess I would want to know because I'm always interested to see what breeders are doing as far as like supplementation and lighting, because there are a lot of thoughts on what is appropriate and what is not. I won't pretend that I have the answer, but I can make some recommendations. But I would be interested to see what their recommendations are for appropriate lighting and appropriate supplementation, or if they do supplementation, because some people just do gut loading and they say it's good. So
I know for my eyes, I supplement mine.
Yeah.
every feed. So yeah. I'm trying to see many questions. Reptile enrichment, yeah,
Yeah.
that's like a huge area that we're
That is a big one.
running on.
Yeah, one of our rat snakes we had, the one that was actually egg bound, but she just laid the slug. She was fine. She actually ended up getting impacted scent glands. It was really weird. She's kind of weird. But she's at an education center in a nature preserve, and part of the things that they did with the summer camp kids was they had all the kids build her enrichment items. So they made her, like, yeah, they made her like this big like PVC like pegboard thing, so she can like slither on up it like she's climbing a tree and everything.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, she loved it. So yeah, I think reptile enrichment is a thing that we need to be causing. So just because they're sitting in the corner doesn't mean they always want to be sitting in the corner. Right. Some do. I like just chilling in bed. I won't lie, but
watch a little TV. Yeah.
TV, yeah.
Yeah, it's something I'm incorporating too. I'm putting like different items in there that they can kind of rotating in and out. So that's been fun too, seeing which ones like it, which ones don't. So
yeah, even like scent. Not for. I mean, reptiles probably don't. Some have better smell than others, but you know, sometimes we even did for some of our long-term things, having like different like you'd rub like a cloth or even like a sandwich bag and like put like basil or oregano or something in there, just kind of smells kind of funny to them. So that was always kind of interesting. I don't know that snake would care too much. They might just go hide in the bag, but
both would be like, what the heck is that?
Yeah,
they probably wouldn't eat for a month. That's
probably not. Yeah, they're like, oh my god. But yeah, I think enrichment, and enrichment doesn't have to be a brand new toy. Enrichment can be, a cool log, something like that. So.
One question. We'll do this question and we wrap up. How do you better improve the relationship between vets and keepers? How do you make that relationship better?
Yeah.
I think it starts with maybe having ambassadors out there that kind of bridge the gap between the two. I think. I know it's something that I kind of want to do since I kind of do bridge the gap a little bit. Like, I'm definitely not a reptile medicine expert by any means, but I at least have the know-how to kind of tell people where to go in the directions and that kind of thing, while also being a breeder. So kind of being in that, I think that maybe part of it is have people who are on both sides. Maybe it's kind of few and far between though. There are some vets that are breeders too. So
yeah,
it's a good question.
That is a good question, and yeah, it does get hard because
same thing.
Oh, yeah, same thing. Yeah, ignore the previous one. Ignored. Too bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it gets hard, and I understand that their goals. The goals can be a little different, and that's kind of where the difficulty always arises a little bit. But I think the end goal of being animal welfare is what will really help everybody kind of succeed. But having someone who also kind of understands like the gold standard for what I may want may not always be practical for everybody, especially in a large scale facility. So, and some vets will do site visits and things like that, and do general like health visits and stuff. So that's nice too. The bigger thing would be getting more people that want to be vets that want to see these guys and that are comfortable seeing these guys. And that would alleviate a lot of stress on everybody because, like you said, we're booked out a month, we're booked out 2 months, and that just gets really hard. So I understand that it is frustrating, and, in some places won't see certain species. We would see, if it was legal to own, we would see it, was kind of our policy. And if it was legal to own, we would see it if you had the proper permitting. How about that? If you owned it legally, kind of deal. We had a guy who asked about bringing in his black widow spider. I was like, if you really want, I'll look at it, But yeah, I think having good people and having that open communication and having people that kind of understand and kind of understand what you want to convey and convey your side of things, or your financial limitations too. Because if I have an owner that's like, I'm recommending a million different things, and they're like, that sounds great, and then I say, okay, it's going to be X amount, they're like, I can't do that. And I mean, I'm happy to tailor, let's cut it down to the big 2 things, or let's cut it down to the one big thing. And then at least if we rule something out, then we can go kind of down the line and make that, treatment plan better. I can test for a lot of different things. I can do a lot of different, I can do ultrasound and x-rays, I can do a lot, but you might not be able to. I couldn't afford every single test in the book. It's just how it is. So I think understanding that and being open with them and being open with, hey, maybe this is like one of my, animals that I'm kind of on the fence about even keeping, I just kind of want to get them by, that's something I've heard a lot too. And that I don't intend this to be something that I keep for the next 10, 15 years. So, and we work a lot with rescues too. So we can, even if you have people that are like, needing to liquidate or, rehome and things like that, we work closely with some rescue centers too. So that was kind of a large, all around way to kind of cover that. But
no, that's a loaded question. That's something that's going to have to be worked on for years and years. I think with people with the right skill set and the right kind of mindset to be open-minded on both sides to improve the communication is ideal.
Yeah. And now I do wildlife medicine. So that's a very different conversation because, what is a nuisance to somebody is not a nuisance to everybody. People are like, oh my gosh, there's a snake in my yard. I got to go kill it. And I'm like, why though? Do you want mice in your house? Or, do you want cane toads? Like there's, they provide a very specific thing for everybody. So I'm dealing on a very different side of things right now. But like I have this peninsula cooter that was hit by a car. So human impact on things and conveying the importance of, these guys are important, is a pet or not a pet, they all have quality and importance.
It's an awesome way to put it. Well, kind of wrap it up from there. Thank you so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. That was an awesome conversation. Definitely have to have you back on in the future later on. Maybe talk more about the rehab side of things. There's just too much to cover.
There is. I know. I could, we could spend 2 hours just talking about the last month.
It went by so fast. I looked. I was like, shoot, I gotta wrap this up. Like, man, I don't want to. It's a great conversation.
All good.
But yeah, thank you so much. I'll put you backstage and I'll talk to you for a minute, and then we'll leave it from there, and I'll end the stream here in a second. So
all right,
over there. All right. Thank you so much, guys, for tapping in tonight, especially with Dr. Annie. She was amazing. Gave a lot of really, really important information. I think it's helpful for both us breeders and keepers out there. So I really hope you enjoyed it. Drop a comment on what you enjoyed out of it. For next week, we're having Jasmine. She's from JTV Geckos, a leopard gecko breeder, pretty new in the game. So that'll be really good to learn about that side of the hobby too. And with that, see you next week. Okay, guys?